Welcome, my beautiful listeners, to another episode of Tales of Love. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button because tonight I have something extraordinary to share with you. A story filled with elegance, temptation, and unforgettable passion. I promise, this is a tale you won't want to miss. So, pour yourself a glass of wine, get comfortable, and prepare for a night of romance that will linger in your heart and imagination long after it's over. This story is called The Billionaire's Yacht Sailboat Fire's Secret Night of Champagne, Seduction, and Passion Under the Stars. It all began with a simple invitation. She wasn't the type of woman who usually mingled with the rich and powerful, but life had a way of surprising her. Her name was Elena, 30 years old, confident in some ways, but quietly insecure in others. She worked in public relations, managing events for corporations, but never attending glamorous ones for herself. That was why, when the sleek, cream-colored envelope slid onto her desk one late Friday afternoon, she thought it had to be a mistake. Inside, written in elegant calligraphy, was an invitation to a private yacht party hosted by none other than Alexander Kane, the billionaire whose name graced the covers of magazines, whispered about in boardrooms, envied by men, and desired by women everywhere. Elena's heart fluttered as she read the words twice, then a third time. She didn't know him. She had never even met anyone remotely close to his social circle. And yet, here it was, a personal invitation with her name, printed clearly in ink. Part of her wanted to laugh it off. Maybe it was an error. Maybe it was meant for another Elena. But another part of her, the part that often stayed hidden beneath layers of responsibility and practicality, began to glow with excitement. She could feel it building in her chest, whispering that maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change. Saturday night arrived faster than she expected. The marina glittered under the city lights as she approached, her heels clicking softly against the wooden dock. She had chosen a silky black dress that hugged her curves without being too obvious, paired with heels that made her legs look endless. Her clutch bag trembled slightly in her hand, not because of the breeze, but because of her nerves. And then she saw it. The yacht. It wasn't a boat. It wasn't even a ship. It was a floating palace, gleaming white against the night sky, with golden lights strung across the deck, music spilling into the air like champagne bubbles, and staff moving gracefully to welcome guests. Laughter, clinking glasses, and the distant sound of waves completed the scene. Her breath caught in her throat. She almost turned back, afraid she didn't belong there. But then, a hand touched her arm lightly. "Miss Elena?" She turned to see a sharply dressed man, one of the staff, bowing slightly. "Mr. Kane is very pleased that you could join us tonight." Her heart raced. He had noticed her arrival. He knew she was here. Gathering her courage, Elena stepped onto the gangway and let herself be led aboard. Her eyes swept across the crowd. Elegant gowns, tuxedos, glittering jewels. Waiters carried silver trays of champagne, while a live jazz band played something smooth and seductive in the background. It was like stepping into another world. And then she felt it. A gaze. Strong, magnetic, pulling at her like gravity. She looked across the deck, and there he was, Alexander Kane himself. Tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his dark hair slicked back, his eyes locked directly on her as if she were the only woman there. Her stomach tightened. Her lips parted. The night had only just begun. The moment Alexander's eyes met Elena's, she felt the world blur around her. The music softened, the laughter faded, and all she could hear was the thudding of her own heartbeat. He didn't look away. He didn't break the spell. He simply began to walk toward her with a slow, confident stride of a man who knew the effect he had on everyone in his path. Elena swallowed hard, forcing herself to breathe. She gripped her clutch a little tighter as his figure closed the distance, each step commanding and sure. Around them, women whispered, men glanced in curiosity, but Alexander Kane had eyes only for her. When he reached her, his presence seemed to eclipse everything else, the golden lights, the shimmer of gowns, the glittering ocean beyond the deck. Miss Elena, he said, his voice low and smooth, with a timbre that slid over her skin like velvet. I'm glad you accepted my invitation. She blinked, caught between awe and confusion. You know my name? A faint, knowing smile tugged at his lips. I make it a point to know the names of the most intriguing guests. And tonight, his eyes swept over her dress with deliberate appreciation. I see I made the right choice. Heat rose to her cheeks, but before she could answer, a waiter appeared with a tray of crystal flutes filled with golden champagne. Alexander took 2 glasses, handing one to her. Their fingers brushed for the briefest moment, and the touch sent a shiver up her arm. To new encounters, he said, raising his glass. Her lips curved into a nervous smile. Toots unexpected invitations. The champagne was cool, crisp, but Elena barely tasted it. She was too aware of him. The way he leaned slightly closer as though sharing a secret, the intensity in his gaze, the way he seemed entirely uninterested in anyone else at the party. Music swelled in the background. A smooth saxophone riff drifted across the deck, couples swaying together in elegant, languid motion. Do you dance? He asked, his tone both casual and challenging, as though he already knew the answer. Her instinct was to laugh nervously, to shake her head, but instead, the words surprised her even as she said them. Only if you lead. His smile deepened, slow and deliberate, as if her answer pleased him more than she realized. He set his glass aside, extended his hand, and waited. Her heart pounded. Her body screamed no while her soul whispered yes. And so, with a breathless courage she hadn't known she possessed, Elena slipped her hand into his. His grip was warm, firm, commanding. He guided her effortlessly to the open space near the band, where the polished deck gleamed under strings of golden lights. The crowd seemed to melt away as he drew her into his arms, one hand to her waist, the other clasping hers. The moment their bodies touched, she felt it, an electric spark, a pulse she couldn't deny. They began to sway. At first, she was stiff, trying not to step on his polished shoes, but Alexander moved with such fluid confidence that she found herself giving in. He guided her with subtle gestures, his hand firm at the small of her back, his gaze never wavering. You're nervous, he murmured, his lips close enough to brush her ear, sending goosebumps racing down her arms. She exhaled a shaky laugh. Is it that obvious? Only to me. His voice dropped lower, intimate. But don't be. You belong here. The words melted something inside her. Belonging was not what she had felt when she first stepped onto the yacht, yet in his arms, it was undeniable. She belonged in his gaze, in his presence, in this moment suspended between reality and dream. Their bodies shifted closer. His hand slid a fraction lower on her back, his fingers pressing lightly against the curve of her spine. She inhaled sharply, and he noticed. Oh, he definitely noticed. His lips curved into a faint, wicked smile, as though he were savoring her every reaction. The song lingered, slow and sultry, wrapping them both in a cocoon of sound and sensation. And then, just as the final notes faded, he leaned down, his lips brushing the shell of her ear as he whispered, "Come with me. There's something I want to show you." Her pulse quickened. The air around her thickened with tension. Every part of her screamed she should hesitate, but she didn't. She couldn't. Yes, she breathed. Without another word, Alexander took her hand again, weaving her through the crowd, past the glittering guests and endless champagne. His grip was steady, unyielding, as though he had claimed her with that single decision. The yacht was vast, with multiple decks, but he led her to a secluded staircase that wound upward toward the private top deck. The sounds of the party grew softer, replaced by the rhythmic lapping of waves against the hull. At the top, she found herself on an open space framed by the night sky. Stars glittered above them, scattered like diamonds on black velvet. The city's lights glowed faintly in the distance, but here, it was just them, the ocean, the stars, and the silence that hummed with possibility. Alexander turned to her, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Now," he said softly, "we can talk without interruption." But Elena knew this was about more than just words. The silence on the private deck was different. It wasn't empty. It was alive, humming with the rhythm of the waves and the energy between them. The music from below drifted faintly, but up here, it was only background, a reminder of the world they had stepped away from. Elena drew in a breath, the salt of the sea mixing with the faint sweetness of champagne still lingering on her lips. The cool breeze teased strands of her hair, brushing them across her cheek. She tucked them back nervously, trying not to focus on the fact that Alexander Kane, billionaire, playboy, and one of the most powerful men alive, stood barely a foot away, watching her like she was his only horizon. "You're quiet," he said at last, his voice carrying low and steady over the night air. She gave a small, self-conscious laugh. "I'm just taking it all in. This isn't exactly my usual Saturday night." "No." He tilted his head, studying her. "What is your usual Saturday night?" Elena hesitated, then shrugged with a wry smile. "Takeout, maybe a glass of wine, and binge-watching a series I'll never admit to anyone." Alexander's lips curved faintly, his eyes glinting with amusement. "Honest. I like that." He stepped closer, not enough to touch, but enough for her to feel the subtle shift in energy between them. "So tell me, Elena, why did you come tonight?" Her heart fluttered at the sound of her name on his lips. It felt different when he said it, intimate, heavy with intent. She swallowed. "Because I was curious. And maybe because I don't usually say yes to things like this. But when your invitation showed up, I couldn't bring myself to say no." "Good," he murmured, his gaze steady on her face. "Because I don't like to be told no." Her lips parted slightly, caught between a nervous laugh and the realization of just how dangerous that statement sounded. Dangerous and thrilling. The stars above seemed brighter now, as though leaning in to witness what was happening between them. He reached for the bottle of champagne he had brought with them, uncorked it with a practiced ease, and poured it into two fresh flutes resting on a small side table. He handed one to her. "To daring choices," he said, his glass raised. She smiled softly, clinking her glass against his. "To unexpected nights." They both sipped, though Elena's pulse was racing too fast for her to taste much of anything. Alexander leaned one arm casually against the railing, his body angled toward her, relaxed yet commanding. "You intrigue me," he said, simply, as if it were a statement of fact. "Most women who come to my events, they're predictable. They dress to impress, they flatter, they chase. But you—" His gaze lingered on her lips for a heartbeat before locking back onto her eyes. "You don't seem to realize how captivating you are, and that fascinates me." Elena's breath hitched. Compliments she could brush off. Flattery she could laugh away. But the way he said it, like he had peeled her open and seen something hidden even from herself, left her speechless. She shifted, placing her glass down before her trembling hands betrayed her. "I think you're used to getting exactly what you want, Mr. Kane." "Alexander," he corrected smoothly. "And yes, usually. But tonight, what I want isn't complicated." Her throat tightened. "And what is that?" His eyes darkened, and for a moment, she thought he might actually say it outright. But instead, he leaned closer, close enough for his breath to brush her cheek, close enough that she could smell the faint, intoxicating scent of his cologne. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I want your honesty. Tell me what you're feeling right now." Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her mind scrambling for an answer. She could lie, deflect, make a joke. But the weight of his gaze stripped away those options. He wasn't asking politely. He was commanding her without raising his voice. "I feel," she began softly, her words catching in her throat. Her eyes darted to his lips, then back to his eyes. "Nervous. Excited. Like I'm standing on the edge of something I don't understand, but I want to." A slow, satisfied smile spread across his face. "That," he murmured, "is the most honest thing I've heard all night." He set his glass aside and reached for her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. His touch was warm, firm, deliberate. She shivered. "You should know something, Elena," he said. "I don't chase what doesn't want me. So, if I've read this wrong, If this isn't what you want, tell me now. Her voice was barely a whisper. And if I don't? His hand tightened slightly around hers, pulling her just a fraction closer. Then tonight becomes exactly what it's meant to be. The air thickened, charged with tension. She could feel the pull between them, magnetic, undeniable. Her pulse thundered in her ears, and yet, she didn't step back. She didn't let go. Instead, she let him draw her closer, their bodies now only inches apart, the ocean breeze wrapping around them like a silent accomplice. The world below the deck had vanished. There was no party, no chatter, no music. Only this private space, the stars above, and the raw, unspoken desire building with every second. And when his thumb traced lightly over the inside of her wrist, the most delicate of touches, she realized her body was already answering the question he hadn't yet asked. The stars above seemed to shimmer brighter as Alexander's thumb lingered against her wrist, his touch impossibly gentle, yet loaded with promise. Elena's breath caught, her body already betraying her, leaning closer before her mind had caught up. He studied her, with the kind of focus that made her feel naked without a single piece of clothing removed. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "You feel it too." It wasn't a question. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she nodded, the honesty of it loosening something deep inside her chest. Alexander's hand slid from her wrist to her jawline, his thumb brushing the soft curve of her cheek. The tenderness of the gesture contrasted with the intensity in his eyes. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned in, giving her every chance to stop him, to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met, softly at first. Just a taste, like the first sip of champagne. Effervescent, dizzying, sweet. But when she gasped, his mouth deepened the kiss, claiming hers with a hunger that made her knees weaken. Elena melted against him, her hands instinctively clutching the lapels of his suit jacket. The kiss grew hotter, more urgent, as though both of them had been waiting too long for this moment. The world shrank to the warmth of his mouth, the strength of his arms around her, the electric fire sparking through every nerve in her body. When they finally broke apart, she was breathless, her lips tingling, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Alexander's voice was husky when he spoke. "Tell me to stop and I will." Her answer was immediate, desperate, certain. "Don't you dare stop." That was all he needed. He claimed her mouth again, this time with no hesitation, no restraint. His hands slid down her back, pulling her flesh against him, and she could feel just how much he wanted her. The night air grew warmer, their bodies pressed together as the waves lapped quietly against the yacht below. Her hands moved on their own, pushing his jacket from his shoulders, sliding over the crisp fabric of his shirt, then daring to trace the hard lines of his chest beneath. He growled low in his throat at her boldness, breaking the kiss only to trail his lips along her jaw, down the sensitive curve of her neck. Elena's head fell back, a soft moan escaping her as he found the hollow of her throat and pressed his mouth there, his teeth grazing lightly against her skin. She felt fire racing through her veins, need coiling tightly low in her belly. "Alexander," she whispered, half a plea, half a prayer. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "Say it again." Her lips trembled. "Alexander." The sound of his name on her tongue was all it took. He scooped her into his arms with ease, carrying her across the deck to a shaded lounge bed nestled near the railing. The stars stretched above them, the ocean endless around them, as he laid her down gently, his body following hers. The rest of the night blurred into heat and sensation. Clothing slipped away between kisses and whispered promises, each piece falling carelessly to the deck as though the world outside their bubble no longer mattered. His hands explored her with reverence, memorizing every curve, every tremble, every gasp that spilled from her lips. She answered him with equal fire, her fingers tangling in his hair, her nails raking lightly down his back as the tension between them snapped into undeniable need. When he finally entered her, it was slow, deliberate, filling her completely. Their breaths mingled, their bodies moving together in a rhythm as natural as the waves rocking the yacht. Each thrust built higher, every sound of pleasure echoing into the night, carried away by the wind but etched forever in memory. He whispered her name against her lips as she cried out in release, stars exploding above her just as ecstasy exploded inside. He followed soon after, his body shuddering, his arms tightening around her as though he'd never let go. They collapsed together, skin slick, hearts racing, breaths ragged. The cool night air washed over them, soothing against their heated bodies. For a long while, neither spoke. There was no need. The silence was full, heavy with satisfaction, with intimacy, with the quiet certainty that this night had changed everything. At last, Alexander pressed a kiss to her temple, his voice soft but firm. "You belong here, Elena. With me." She closed her eyes, her lips curving into a sleepy, satisfied smile. "Then don't let me go." The yacht drifted gently under the starlit sky, carrying their secret passion into the dawn of a new day. And in that moment, wrapped in the billionaire's arms, Elena knew this was no ordinary night. It was the beginning of something far greater. Sparkles the end sparkles.